Hi, this is Dee Kayalar with USD's Career Development Center. Welcome to Alumni Zoom Trips, our virtual webcast series with USD alumni experts that provide a glimpse into the life of our alumni in the aftermath of the pandemic. This program is co-hosted with the Office of Alumni Relations. Today, I have the pleasure of hosting USD alumna Amanda Nelson, Director of Communications with the San Diego Housing Federation. Amanda received her master's in nonprofit leadership and management from the University of San Diego. A storyteller and communications expert with over a decade's experience, Nelson was recently named Women of Influence by the San Diego Housing Federation. In addition, Amanda has her own video production company and has also founded Uptown Housing Advocates that provides education around the growing housing crisis in San Diego. Prior to her role at the Housing Federation, Amanda has managed communications and digital branding for the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce and leads San Diego. She also volunteers frequently with the San Diego Film Festival as well as San Diego Pride. Amanda, it's a delight to have you joining us today. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. What a profound career journey. So, can you tell our listeners how you got started in your career and how would you say your USC graduate degree has prepared you for your career?
I got started in my career. I kind of fell into it. I'm in communications and I am a talker. I was in trouble a lot in school for talking, and I kind of used that as a springboard to make a career out of it. I spent a lot of time in high school volunteering with my church group at the time, doing a lot of different um, we did a lot of performances through church. And so it just kind of became a natural thing that when I went to undergrad to kind of major in communications and kind of go from there. And when I started USD, I was really looking for an opportunity to dig deeper into nonprofits. And I was really captivated with the nonprofit and leadership program where we really focused on learning not only the theories that go into nonprofit leadership and management and sustaining nonprofits, but also working in groups to create various different projects with nonprofits in town too. So it was a really great opportunity to learn, but then be putting into action what I was learning. So when I completed the program, I walked out with over a dozen different projects that I could pinpoint to employers and say, this is what I worked on. Here was the outcome. Here's how I can help it in my new role here.
Wonderful. So the program's sort of helping you to identify the social needs that are out there and also helping you with developing relationships with various local nonprofits so you can actually put the things that you've learned into practice. How would you describe the impact of the pandemic on the nonprofit sector?
The nonprofit space in the pandemic it's been challenging, especially with our sector in affordable housing. A lot of our members, a lot of what we do is in-person events. So it's been shifting not only how we host events, right? And then also, how are we providing our services to the people who need it most? A lot of things that I've seen is the food, for example, our food banks, they've had to restructure how they're giving food. Churches in my neighborhood have had to restructure how they are doing their food drives. Um, and it's just, and then you have your arts and culture nonprofits who are we're not able to do performances. I go to see the Nutcracker every year and we did it virtually. There would drive up Nutcrackers. We streamed it from a company in a different state. I think it's been really interesting, but at the same time, in a pandemic, we're all turning to arts. We're looking for entertainment. So we're turning to puzzles, TV shows, and we're rediscovering arts in a new way. So it's been an interesting struggle for nonprofits, but I've seen a lot of innovation, and I'm really excited to see what continues out of,
Mhm.
this turmoil.
And how are the ways that you're delivering services at the San Diego Housing Federation sort of changed during this time? Have you pivoted entirely in terms of your programming to the virtual environment? Are there other ways in which you've adapted?
We've done everything virtual. We host monthly educational workshops, and those have all moved to a virtual format. Our award show was done virtually last year and will be done again this year virtually. Our conference was done virtually. Um, you know, it was a really great experience, but we missed those connections. One of the favorite things about the organization I work with is we help create different connections and different relationships. We bring together, developers and nonprofit service providers and funders, and in a room, they're able to talk and figure out what their needs are. And we're, a connector, a convener for that. And so it's been a little bit sad that we weren't able to bring all that together. And we did bring it together as best we could virtually. And then for me on a personal level, I started this job in December of last year, or 2019, excuse me. And the pandemic happened in March. So I'm just starting to, get my bearings, understand what's going on, trying to meet our board members, and then everything goes virtual. So I still feel a little new as far as some of these relationships are concerned, because there's still a lot of people I haven't met face to face.
Absolutely, absolutely. And are there, the nonprofit sector has been forced to shrink a considerable amount because of the pandemic, but are there areas where you're noticing some hiring activity?
Yes, my organization, the Housing Federation, we just went through a hiring process. So we're looking to bring on, I'm currently interviewing for interns, and we're bringing on a policy coordinator. So I think there is growth still happening. But it's for, nonprofits who have been around for a while, ones that have the ability to shift and change. My neighbor works for YMCA, and she's been furloughed for almost a year now because they're not able to necessarily do things that they were doing the same way before. So it's really specific on what the nonprofit does, and then also kind of how their funding model is. If they're getting funding from the government, or if they have really big, big sponsors or foundation support, they may not be struggling as much as something that might be individually donor based. So it's really kind of running the gamut. It's a little overwhelming, and I feel for the sector. But the nonprofit sector is also full of scrappy innovators and people who will, who can make things happen. If anybody can do it, it's the nonprofit sector. So
What would your top advice be for students or alumni who are currently on the job market for PR or digital marketing roles?
yeah, that's a good question. My top advice would be to really work your network, your alumni network. Get on LinkedIn, connect with me, see who I'm connected to. I have, I think, close to 2,000 connections. So I know a lot of people. Lean on your alumni and your network and former bosses, because I think a lot of what's going to happen right now is it's going to come down to who you know, and being able to make that personal connection, because interviewing over Zoom, I almost said Skype, which who remembers Skype? It's
COVID world, it's all about Zoom now.
yeah. But it's interviewing virtually is a different
Skill set.
yeah, it's a very different skill set. I mean, even right now, I have a blazer on, so I look nice, but I'm wearing leggings and slippers underneath, So it's a different world. But I would really say lean on your network and just ask people if they know of something.
Yeah. And also to follow up on that, you mentioned even the interviewing process and the job search process has changed drastically because of COVID. Do you have any tips for those who are preparing for virtual job interviews, in addition to making sure that you look the part professionally?
Yeah, I always look for someone who's researched the company, but then also the person you're interviewing with. Take the time to look at their LinkedIn, look at their bio on the website if they have one. Look at what the organization that you're interviewing is doing, especially in reference to PR. Look and see what their last press release was about. What are they working on? Their last social media post. And then also come with a few ideas, maybe one or two things of saying, um, I love what you guys are doing this. Have you thought about including this? I just spoke with an intern last week, and she sent me the thank you email, thank you for your time. It was great to talk to you. And she included a 3-page PDF that had some screenshots and mock-ups of different ways to like increase to do something on our Instagram stories, but it just was that little element that I was like, wow, she's putting a lot of extra time beyond just that 15-minute phone interview, but she's looked at our stuff. She's looked at, what we're doing. And she took the extra mile of putting something together, and it just kind of catapulted her a little bit higher. So I really encourage when people are looking to think of ways you can stand out. Think of ways that you can kind of, because when you're interviewing, you're talking to, I don't know, dozens of people sometimes. So really try and find a way to stand out and then bring it back to your skill set. Her skill set is a lot of graphic design, which I don't necessarily have. And I was like, ooh, this is good.
Sure. Really talking more about, here are my strengths and here are the ways that I hope to contribute towards your mission and vision, and making sure that you've actually are able to showcase that to the interviewer in an authentic, unique, creative way. Thank you for that. And what does a typical day on the job look like for you? How was it like before COVID, and how has it changed?
Oh, it has changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
Pre-COVID, I live just a quick 20-minute bus ride from my office. So I'd hop on the bus, I would read a little book, on that little bus ride, or have an audio book playing, and would get into the office. I had meetings with my boss pretty much every day to just kind of sit down, see what we were talking about. When I first started, we were still working on our bond measure, which was on the ballot for November 2020. And so that was a lot of our focus. And then the pandemic happened, and it shifted everything. The big part of my role for 2020 was to create a speakers bureau, where I was going to be organizing this massive speakers thing where we would go and talk to community planning groups and town councils and PTAs and a bunch of different organizations to talk about our bond measure. Then the pandemic happened, and suddenly it was like, okay, we're going to just scrap kind of this big old project, and we're just going to focus on sustaining our programs and, marketing the bond measure, but in a completely different format that I was not necessarily involved in. And it really just shifted. Suddenly I was thinking about, how do I make sure that we're documenting our virtual experience, but documenting it in a way that's not just a bunch of screenshots, because we have an annual report that we produce. How are we going to be creating engaging virtual content? So suddenly my role kind of pivoted a little bit to video producer, which is what I did for a few years running my production company. So great that I had that skill set. And it was wonderful to be able to kind of jump in and think about, with our awards show, we did a wonderful 73-minute YouTube live program where we had, we got a video production team together, and we shot content, and we pre-recorded it, and we played it live. And a lot of people, I think I just spilled my secret, but up until a few moments ago, people still thought it was live. But it's really pivoted, and now everything's done virtually. I haven't seen my team in person in almost a year, and that's really just that's a bummer.
Sure.
But the work really hasn't necessarily changed. It's just kind of looking at it from a different format. How are we? And then when I'm pitching media stories, how are we? Because we're organizing media interviews through Zoom and sending them pre-edited B-roll, because they're not able to come to our event and get, this. And it's been interesting, but it's been a lot of fun to kind of rethink about, how does PR and media and social media even change in a virtual world when we're all getting Zoom fatigue, we're on our screens all the time. I think we're almost a year into this pandemic, and I think a lot of us are really hitting our wall. So now going forward, how are we going to make sure that our conference and our award show is engaging
Mhm.
when we're all kind of like sick of looking at these little screens?
Are there sort of aspects of this crisis that have proven to be sort of key learning moments for you, or the changes that you've introduced in your processes and the way that you do things or track things that you think you'll sort of take with you and sort of carry with you even after the pandemic is over?
Yeah, I think a lot of meetings will still stay virtual.
Mm,
I think for myself, I love going to meetings, which I don't think a lot of people do.
mhm,
But I love the conversations and the stuff that can be heard in meetings because I'm always looking for the story. So when
mm,
I'm in a meeting, I'm thinking about what from this meeting can I use as a tweet later or as a way to tell a little bit more about our story or a way to connect our history to whatever's happening.
mhm,
Um, but I think a lot of it will stay virtual because we're still able to have that side chatter virtually, and we're still able to get stuff done. And I think it has the productiveness of a phone call, right? I used to love phone conferences because you want to get through stuff. You don't have to dilly dally as much. And I think a video call is that nice little blend between the two.
mhm,
As far as processes, gosh, I don't know. I think that that's still kind of filling its way out.
mhm,
I didn't anticipate this being a year-long pandemic, and we're going into year two,
mhm.
and I'm still figuring out what works and what doesn't because it's a constant shifting thing.
You mentioned something very interesting, how you felt called upon to, transfer skills from another experience, right, into this one. You mentioned how you found yourself sort of producing videos now, editing videos, etc. So beyond, I mean, what qualities and skills make someone successful in your field?
Well, that's a loaded question because it's
Why?
PR.
Mhm,
Yeah, like PR, communications, marketing, advertising they all kind of flow together, but their outcome is a little bit different. And I'm a department of one, so I kind of go between them a lot. And I think that's probably one of the key things, especially someone who's looking into nonprofits,
mhm,
like PR within nonprofits. A lot of times you're small departments. And so you're kind of moving between that PR function where you're trying to get the media and other people to talk about you to
mhm,
where you're doing the marketing function to where you're talking at people
mhm,
about you. But
mhm,
then sometimes you're also doing the advertising portion where you're trying to get call for nominations or call for speakers. And I think it's just really about knowing what your end goal is. I think that's really the key. And that's going to shift and change. And then, a lot of times I do a lot of crossover with events and development because that's where a lot of communication lies too. Fundraising and communications and marketing really go hand in hand. People
mhm,
want to know why they're donating. And in order to understand why they're donating, you need to communicate to them, whether that be from an interview on the news station or a social media post, or perhaps both, why to make that donation or why to attend that conference or that event or what have you. So I think it's really being able to wear multiple hats. And then just also just being a really great storyteller.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because that I was going to ask you, given your, incredibly successful background in storytelling, what makes a good story? What would your sort of five, I don't know, like, if you were to give your top tips for storytelling, what would they be?
Yeah. Oh, stories. Okay. Uh, I've been thinking about this question since you sent me the email to just kind of figure out what exactly I think makes a compelling story. And I think it's that standard stuff we were all kind of taught in English class way back when. But you want to have your plot, your good plot, and your good characters that you connect with. And I used to think a good story had a good climax where it's like, maybe there's a tension or a sad moment, but somebody overcomes a challenge. And the pandemic has really shifted the way that I look at a story, because with the pandemic, we're just kind of sitting here in this
Bubble, if you will.
bubble. Yeah. We're just kind of sitting, just, waiting to get vaccinated, for us to hit herd immunity, for it to be safe to be able to go back to school, and for ventilation systems to be,
Sure.
clear. And it's made me realize that I think a key element of a story is really just the journey, right? That process from learning about your character or whatever, and not just the end. Stories don't end when you close the book, or when you finish the Netflix series, or
Mhm.
you know when your series gets canceled. But
Mhm.
the stories continue. um, and I think a really good story is one where you are left wondering what's next, and when you can let your imagination kind of fill in those blanks.
Mhm.
um, that's
Okay, so yeah, it's such an interesting way to put. What I'm almost hearing is that if you're able to incite the storyteller in someone else, is when you've actually told a really great story, because
exactly,
you've
exactly.
gotten their imagination to sort of fill in all the blanks and, yeah, create that connection.
Right? Because that's what we've been doing, as
Mhm.
humans for centuries from the beginning, is just telling a story and passing it on. Think about bedtime stories. The story told to you by your parent might be the same story their parent told them, and their parent told them. And it's really just continuing that story, and making it be a story that's shareable, that other people want to share with. I heard recently on TikTok, of all places, so I don't know if it's completely valid, but that we have essentially 36 plots. Every story kind of comes from these same 36 plots. Um, and while that sounds a little limiting, I also think it really points to 36 themes of the human experience.
Mhm.
And I think those stories are just told again and again because they're ultimately relatable.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think in the way that they're told, right, they get and retold, you also end up sort of co-creating them, right,
Mhm.
with the people that you tell them to, and kind of gets passed on and on from there. For those people who are interested in volunteering opportunities within the nonprofit sector, and just to, expand and develop their experience, are there any resources that you would suggest for them, or particular institutions to look into?
Yes, membership organizations are great. So here locally in San Diego, there's PRSA San Diego, which is Public Relations Society of America. There's chapters in pretty much every big city, most mid-sized cities as well.
Mhm.
There's also the American Marketing Association, which has a chapter here. Um, if you're still in school, add to San Diego, the number two. San Diego is also a great organization. They're primarily comprised of young professionals in marketing. And then YNPN, Young Nonprofit Professionals Network, is a great one. Rising Arts Leaders is a great one here locally. And Emerging Museum Professionals is another great one if you're in the museum space, because they also need PR and marketing too.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of local stuff, and I would suggest that's the best place to volunteer. You get on their board, then you're meeting people from other organizations. When I first moved here almost 8 years ago, I immediately joined uh, American Marketing Association and Add2. And from there, it's just kind of, my network has grown, and it was able to give me so much experience. I have volunteered for multiple conferences for those organizations, where I would run the entire social media, create their graphics, put together their report afterwards. And it gave me a lot of really great firsthand experience, but then also other people saw that I was regularly at these events doing this work, which then led to more jobs, which has then led to more opportunities. So those are just some marketing focused organizations. But then if you're, in housing, there's a lot. This is why I'm like, go check out Google, find what you're interested in, join them. And then once you get your first job, start asking your employer to cover these things. I ask the Housing Federation, they cover my PRSA membership, my Voice of San Diego membership. Um, and then I'm also personally involved with like League of Women Voters. So just different things, whether you're passionate about yourself or that you're looking professionally to get into.
Sure. Just utilizing each connection to sort of branch out to other, amazing connections, and also making sure that you ask for some of those things as opportunities for professional growth and development within the organizations that you're already affiliated with. Amanda, these have been such helpful resources, and it's been absolutely delightful getting a chance to meet you and learn from you. So thank you for the opportunity, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here. And please connect with me on LinkedIn. So
We'll definitely be referring students and alumni your way. Thank you for your
wonderful.
time.
Thank you.